So you want to learn how to cook something new, so you look it up, there's 8,000 recipes, you have no idea which one to choose, so you just kind of wing it, pick one, hope for the best. Because there's no way you're actually going to cook all of them, but I will. And not only will I do it for you, but...
Yes, I'll do it for you.
Okay, I'm not actually going to cook all of them, but just the top 3 most popular / recent ones. And then I'll tell you which one I'd recommend based on taste, time, and difficulty. I'll also be combining the things I learned from these guys and forming my own recipe. But enough of that. The 3 contestants we have today are pro home cooks. I think they used to be Brothers Green Eats. I don't know their names though. Not a biography. Next is Joshua Weissman. Wiseman. Josh. And last, but certainly not least, we have Babish Culinary Universe. Okay, first up is Pro Home Cooks. Look, I'm not going to give you their recipes, obviously. For that, you definitely should go check out their videos, but I will show you what it's actually like to try to cook this when you don't know what you're doing and you don't have a Michelin star kitchen setup in your mother's basement. And when I say don't know what you're doing, this recipe calls for egg whites, and I immediately screw that up dropping the yolk in there. I panic first and then somehow get the yolk out of there and save it. What you're actually supposed to do is kind of dump the yolk back and forth between the 2 eggshell halves and let the egg white drip into the bowl. I've never done this before, but you'll see that I get it down later. I honestly don't know why people do it. Maybe it's to avoid the cholesterol, but...
Do I look like I give a damn about my cholesterol?
Okay, so one of the things you notice about this guy is he clearly knows what he's doing. He just kind of throws all these sauces into a bowl with no measurements. Look, I'm not on that level yet, so I just followed the recipe he had listed in his description. No idea how accurate it is to what he did in his video though. Another thing to take note of is his recipe says baking soda, but in the video he corrects it to baking powder. So I followed the video and used baking powder. I also forgot to whisk the breading, so I made sure to do it here real quick before dipping in the chicken. Speaking of the breading, I've never fried chicken with just cornstarch and no flour before. According to Pro Home Cooks, people do it to avoid gluten. Never cared about that, but the chicken actually came out amazing. It doesn't have all like the little nooks and crannies of like traditional fried chicken, but the unique crunch of this is actually pretty delicious. Just try it. But this recipe is pretty easy to make and doesn't take that long, so I'll be giving it a 5 out of 5 for both time and difficulty. As far as taste goes, it's a little too salty for my taste, so for that it gets a 3 out of 5 in that category. Again, when he makes it, he's just throwing everything together, no measurements, so it's possible what he does in his video is different than what's actually listed in his recipe, but still, a total score of 13 out of 15.
That's pretty good.
Okay, my boy Josh has a lot going on with this recipe. This boy fancy. But I have no idea if I even made this right because I have no idea what he wants. I grated this garlic and ginger for the chicken marinade because that's what he did in his video, but his recipe says minced or to go garlic mining, and in his video he also had me do this to the marinade. But I couldn't find this step in the written recipe he listed. Speaking of the marinade, I did the 1 hour version. He also likes to list both the US and metric measurements together, which is nice, but at one point his recipe says 1 tablespoon or 14 grams, but then in the video he'll say 2 tablespoons or 14 grams. Well, which one is it? I could ask, is 14 grams actually equal to 1 or 2 tablespoons, but I don't really care about that because...
This is America, and if I see you in the street, I'm snapping the...
But for real, do I use 1 or 2 tablespoons? I don't really know, but I just went with 1. I also couldn't find shiradashi in my area for this recipe, but he says it's optional, which I don't really understand the point of optional ingredients with these chefs. Like, if it isn't really going to make a difference, then why even include it at all? But I'm not a chef, so. Speaking of, I really struggled making the sauce while it was cooking in the wok. I definitely prefer the put everything in one bowl and just pour it all in there at once method that the other recipes used because it's easier. Trying to measure every single ingredient while it's actively cooking just adds a layer of stress that I'm not really looking for because I'm worried things are burning while I'm trying to measure out the next thing. I even removed the wok from the heat because of this. And yes, you could measure everything out in advance, but I don't have 18 separate tiny bowls to put all these measurements in, and even if I did, no. I think his method is better when you are good enough at cooking to not need any measurements at all and you can kind of just throw stuff in there by feel. Because of the extravagant ingredients, the confusion with the recipe not lining up with the video, and the challenge of making the sauce in the hot wok, I'm gonna have to give this a 2 out of 5 for difficulty. For time, it takes a little longer than the first recipe, so I'll give it a 4 out of 5, but it definitely tastes better. This chicken was amazing. I would give it a 5 out of 5, but I don't know if it really had the General So taste that I'm really used to. Maybe that's because I wasn't able to find shiradashi or made the wrong choices during the whole recipe thing. I don't know. But for just a pure taste test, 5 out of 5. It just needs to taste like General So's, so it gets a 4 out of 5 for me. And that gives this recipe a total of 10 out of 15.
Not bad.
Alright, Babish's recipe also calls for this egg white thing, and you see, I didn't forget to do it the right way this time. Doesn't make it any less annoying though, but before moving on with this recipe, Babish does mention in his video that he got this recipe from someone named J. Kenji Lopez, so I don't really know who to give credit to, but still, figured I'd mention it. Pro Home Cooks had the fully cornstarch breading for his chicken. Josh and Babish though have a more traditional breading for their fried chicken, but Babish nailed it. Definitely the best fried chicken. He has you pour half of the marinade into the breading to kind of contribute to more of those nooks and crannies in the fried chicken. I don't really know how much the marinade thing really contributes to that though, or if it's actually the additional baking powder he used that Josh didn't. But again, I'm not the chef, so look, all I know is if I can't tell a stark difference, I'm not going to do it again. So as far as the marinade mixing goes, we'll just call it one of those optional ingredients. The biggest thing with this recipe is the sauce. He showed that you don't need a wok to cook this, but instead could just use a saute pan. However, his sauce is a much lighter color than mine ever was, even before cooking it, and I have no idea why. He says that he changed the ingredients in his voiceover to include more sauce because in the video, apparently there wasn't enough sauce for the amount of chicken he cooked, although it looked pretty perfect to me, so I don't know why he would change it or what he was even talking about. I'm not a chef. Speaking of, remember that whole don't know what you're doing thing? I literally just at this moment realized that this whole time I should have been cutting green onions from the other side. That makes so much more sense. My whole life. Well, every recording was shot previous to this realization, so next video, I'll get that right. But okay, back to the sauce. Like I said, I have no idea why his looks so much lighter. Maybe it's the lighting, and maybe in a wok instead of a saute pan, it might not have felt like so much sauce. I don't know, but all of the extra ingredients he put in the recipe leaves you with plenty of sauce, more than enough. In fact, I'd say it was a problem for me because I ended up burning it and made my already dark sauce even darker. With the other two recipes, you weren't really cooking the sauce for any time at all. It just kind of thickened and you were ready to throw the chicken in. And in his video, it looked to be the same exact way for him, but since he provided the additional sauce in his recipe, you're left with way more sauce that needs to be cooked down a little more. And if you don't know what you're doing, you could burn it. Because of this, for difficulty, I would give this a 3 out of 5. With Josh, I just felt lost sometimes, not knowing what the recipe actually was supposed to be. For Babish's, however, I just felt inexperienced, so he gets 1 more point. But for time, I would say it was about the same with Josh, so 4 out of 5. As for taste, I realized I burned it, so I tried to kind of taste through that and ignore it, but regardless of me burning it, the chilies completely overshadowed everything. I would say a dozen chilies is too much, not because it's too spicy or too hot, just the volume of spice. In his recipe it says 6 to 12 chilies, but in his video he says 12, so I went with the video. Because of that, I would give the taste a 3 out of 5, leaving Babish with an overall score of 10 out of 15.
Not bad.
But after compiling the results, Pro Home Cooks came away with a landslide victory. But I think it's interesting to note that it's not because the chicken was better. As you can see by the taste scores, Josh had the best tasting chicken, and Babish had the best fried chicken. But Pro Home Cooks ran away with the ease of cooking this recipe. Maybe if this was a competition for actual chefs, Josh or Babish would more than likely win. But this is for people that are cooking at home with limited experience making this dish, and Pro Home Cooks cater to that the best. I still think there's a way to mix all of their strategies together though for the best General So's. Using Pro Home Cooks' recipe as a base for time and ease, but using Babish's fried chicken but removing some of the unessential steps to save time, or adding chicken stock like Josh did to maybe counter some of the saltiness of Pro Home Cooks' recipe. There's a multitude of ways to mix what they all did, but regardless, Pro Home Cooks is our winner. Now if only there was someone that would experiment mixing their recipes for the best General So's of all time. General So's chicken might as well be called 3-bowl chicken. 1 bowl for the marinade, 1 bowl for the breading, and another bowl for the sauce. For the first bowl, crack an egg, whisk it! I'll pass on that egg white stuff. Then add 1.5 tablespoons of soy sauce and another 1.5 tablespoons of shaoxing wine. Whisk it! Finally, add 3 tablespoons of cornstarch and 1/4 teaspoon of baking soda. And then you whisk it good! Anyways, you're supposed to use chicken thighs for general sows, but multiple videos said it was okay to use chicken breast instead. And when I went shopping for these recipes, the grocery store was out of thighs, so I used chicken breast for all these recipes. Use what you like. Anywho, cut up the chicken into bite-sized pieces. I personally like to cut off pieces of the chicken that I think I might not like first. When you're done cutting up the chicken, put it in the marinade, but be sure to whisk it one more time because it's possible the cornstarch has settled on the bottom of the bowl, and then just let the chicken sit while you're doing the next steps. Oh, and don't forget to... Okay, second bowl, 1 cup of cornstarch and 1 cup of flour, then 1 teaspoon of baking powder and 1 teaspoon of salt. Whisk it. Last bowl for the sauce, 3 tablespoons of soy sauce, 3 tablespoons of shaoxing wine, 2 tablespoons of rice vinegar, 4 tablespoons or 1/4 cup of chicken stock, 3 tablespoons of sugar, 1 tablespoon of cornstarch, and 1 teaspoon of sesame oil. And you guessed it,
no, it's high.
this isn't exactly the healthiest thing to eat, so I like to add carrots and broccoli to make myself feel better. If you don't like carrots, obviously omit them, but I can't lie. The way that the broccoli soaks up the sauce, you just kinda gotta have it. But do you? Mince up 4 cloves of garlic and the same amount of ginger, probably about a 2-inch knob. I've seen some not peel their ginger. Gross. Peel it. Chop up some scallions, but unlike me, do it from the correct side and it'll be easier. Then give the chicken one last mix in the marinade and start covering each crevice with breading. But before you start this, go ahead and get your deep frying oil heating up to 350 to 375 degrees Fahrenheit. That way when you're done covering all your chicken, the oil will be ready to start cooking. For deep frying, I used vegetable oil. Then carefully put your chicken in, or you could start an overflow like I just did. Like an idiot. Or just use less oil. Good luck. But if you're going to do multiple batches, be aware that the temperature of the oil will come down with each batch of chicken, so you might need to turn the heat up to keep it at the right temperature. For example, on my stove, I heat up the oil with medium heat, about 5 out of 10, but for any subsequent batches, I turn the heat up to like 7 out of 10 to keep the oil hot. If you don't do this and the oil is too cold, the breading might come out soggy and the chicken undercooked. After about 4 to 5 minutes of frying at the right temperature, take the chicken out and place on a wire rack or a paper towel to cool. For the broccoli, I highly suggest steaming it. To do so, fill the water right up to the steamer and bring it to a boil. Let the water boil and evaporate until the water is beneath the steamer. That way the water won't make contact with the broccoli. Then rinse your broccoli and throw it in and immediately cover. Leave it for 5 minutes, then take it out. That's it. Some people steam it for up to 10 minutes, but if you overcook the broccoli, it will fall apart when you mix it in with the general sows. So I go with 5. For this whole process, my stove is set to medium-high heat or 7 out of 10. As for rice, I used long grain white rice, 1 part rice to 1.5 parts water. Some people do 2 parts water, whatever. What this means is I used 1 cup of rice and then 1.5 cups water. Before adding the water though, make sure to rinse the rice a few times. Then throw the rice and the water in a pot or saucepan and bring to a boil. Add salt if you like. I don't. Once it starts boiling, cover and turn the heat down to its lowest setting and let the rice simmer for 20 minutes. That's it. Rice done. Or let it sit for 5 minutes afterwards if you prefer. Now that everything is ready, heat up your wok and then heat up some oil. I used canola oil and my stove is set to medium-high heat or 7 out of 10. You can tell the oil is ready when it starts to shimmer. At this point, throw in your garlic, ginger, carrots, and some of your scallions. Save some scallions for garnish later if you prefer. Also throw in 4 to 8 arbol chilies depending on how much spice you want. As you can see, I use 4. Once things begin to brown and become fragrant, throw in the sauce. But make sure you whisk the sauce one more time before pouring it in, because again, it's possible the cornstarch has settled on the bottom of the bowl. Now, as soon as you see the sauce begin to boil, pour your chicken in. The sauce will thicken as you continue to mix the chicken with everything. Then remove it from the heat and stir in the broccoli. Now the only thing left to do is to plate it and get your favorite couch blanket for the nap you're about to take after you eat that good. Before you go, listen to me bored attempting to sing the song from my teaser video, which can be found on TikTok and Instagram if you feel like following. Just think about it. You could even make a bunch of burner accounts to do the same thing with. Consider it. But for real, massive shout out to Pro Home Cooks, Josh, and Babish for teaching me how to cook this. I've had General Tso's maybe 20 times this month trying to figure out exactly how I'd like it, so I probably won't be eating it again for a while. But the experience I had making this for those close to me is something I won't forget, and something I'm very grateful for. Look, we all go through things, so it's nice to do for those that do for you. So again, thanks to those guys, thanks to those close to me, and thank you for watching. Till next time, peace.